Hey, we're live now, and I see lots of people already here. I see Chris, Roberto, Dan, Mauro, Raju. I heard people talking about Texas, and then people talk about Germany, and that's so cool. And I see people talking about Utah and Denver. Oh, looks like we have people from all over the world. So thanks everyone. Very good to have out here. If you can hear me, if you can see me, can you please say in the chat that the sound is good, so we can get started. So let me see who I can say hello. And you can go ahead and tell where you're from, so you can say a hello for everyone. And let me see here. I see Tiago said, "Hey guys, Dorival say hello." Tiago, he's in MA. What's MA? Should be Massachusetts, maybe. Chris, it's Raju say sound is great. Okay, so I think we're getting through. Vidian, all good here. Austin, Texas. Here, see you all great. From Luke, Chris. All right, so Thiago, Roberto, Dan, Mauro, Raju, Chris. All right, I have lots of people here with us. Sound okay. Hello from New York City. Dorival, nice to see you. Nice to see Venkat again. All right. Okay, so we're going to get started with this. And so I'm just going to go introduce our guest here today. And we're doing this for him and for all of us because Venkat has an event coming up, right? And on his event, you can be a speaker. So, hi Venkat, how are you, man? Great to have you here.
Well, thanks for having me here, and it's great. And I really thank everyone for joining. I'm excited.
Excellent. So Venkat, we're going to do this very, very interactive, okay? So Hyun is saying voice and sound is good here in Houston. Dan is from Wisconsin. Alain says sounds good. So everyone's good. Hello from Ottawa, from Sebastian. Yeah, Thiago said in Massachusetts. All right, so we have lots of people from all over. So Venkat, we wanted to do this very interactive. We want everyone to ask questions because we're going to help you with your talk, submitting talks, ideas for topics that you want to talk about. We can even analyze your submission if you want to take a look at that. We're gonna be here for all of you that are watching us here, right? So get your questions ready. But for us to begin, Venkat, I want to ask you one question, right? You're running an event in Colorado next year, right? And you've been traveling all over the world, doing events everywhere, right? So what got into you that you decided to do your own event?
Going crazy, I guess. So one of the things that I really wanted to do was, so first of all, I'll say that I speak in a lot of conferences. I have the deepest respect for all the organizers. I love a lot of conferences I speak in, and I see that there are, so many conferences, inviting really good speakers. And last year I was having a conversation, in some conference. And I was suggesting, hey, we should really bring in this particular speaker. And the immediate reaction was, well, we really want, well-known speaker. And immediately I said, imagine if I was told that 20 years ago, I wouldn't be here at all. Because every one of us start, in the beginning. And there are, not everybody new is going to be successful. But everybody who is successful is new at some point. And so it's extremely important to cater to that need of a diverse set of speakers, both experienced and new. And we want to really bring out and give the opportunity. And if we can, in the process, really help the speakers come out and, say what they're passionate about, be able to present on it, have some guidance from, other speakers, I think it'll be a great event. So I thought to myself, what if I were to create an event where the event would give an opportunity for just about anybody to be able to come and speak, and we will evaluate based on the topics they submit, the experience they had in terms of speaking at user groups or speaking at their own offices, right? If we can get a video snapshot of what they have done, that can be really helpful for us to evaluate and say, yep, this person has a potential to speak, may not be a well-known name, that's okay. But we're going to, bring them over and we're going to learn from that particular person as well. So it's all about learning. It's about diversity of topics. It's diversity of speakers, and that's what I really put out for. And I'll quickly say that we have the call for papers open for another a little bit, 2 weeks time, November 10th. But I'm really happy that even before, how you and I work, right? We keep everything for the deadline. That's what deadline is awesome, because deadline drives us to get things done. But I'm thrilled that even though there is 2 more weeks, we have received proposals from 140 speakers so far. Not 140 proposals, 140 speakers. So each speaker, if they have 1, 2, or 3 proposals, that already goes into a few hundreds already. So I'm absolutely thrilled that so many have, submitted talks. And I see talks being submitted in so many different areas as well. So overall, I think we're going to have a really good event. So, my goal was to really, provide that kind of opportunity for a good learning experience from a diverse set of topics and speakers. And looks like that's going to happen.
Okay, that's so excellent. All right, so we are here today. You guys are watching us, and we are here today. We want to hear, what is your question? I mean, what is how can we help you become a better speaker? How can we help you become a speaker to actually get started being a speaker in events? Right? Maybe you already speak, like Venkat said, you already speak in your company, for example, and you never spoke in a public event. Maybe you speak in your country and you never spoke in an international event, right? Or whatever it is. So I want to hear your questions. And so I was going to ask a question before everyone did, but since there is already one, I'm going to start with Chris here. So Chris says, here's my question: what is the minimum system requirement for a speaker? That is, how do I get started giving talks? I have lots of good experience and lots of opinions, but I don't have any publications or previous talks. How do I get started? What do I do to be qualified to give a talk one day?
Well, I think that's the key here. I think, Chris is definitely already qualified, because Chris said 2 things that are extremely important there. And that is, I have a lot of opinions. That's really what it is, right? And I have a lot of experience, a good experience, good or not. The thing is this, one of the things I always tell people is, how do I qualify? When I talk about topics, I am not the person who wrote these topics. When I talk about Java, I'm in a conference where people like Brian Getz are speaking. I'm not the one who created these things, right? So what qualifies me to speak? And I would say the argument there is, I have a story to tell. My experience cannot be somebody else's experience. It's mine. And I'm there to tell my journey, my experience, and I want to share with somebody. And if at the end of the day, if I can motivate a developer to go and learn and apply, I think I've served my purpose. And I'll tell you one thing, Bruno, that the best comment I ever got in all these years, 20 years of speaking, I'll never forget this. And I gave a talk at 10 a.m. And at 3 a.m. the next morning, I get an email saying, damn it, Venkat, I was in your talk at 10 a.m. It blew my mind, and I'm here at 2 in the morning still tinkering with this code. And I'm like, my job is done, right? If you can excite somebody to say, that is important, I've got to go learn more about it. I cannot teach everything about some topic, but I always say I'm that catalyst. If I can just ignite that light in their mind, and they can go learn. And that's what I would say is really. So if you have opinions, if you have a personal experience, then talking, and most of what we do is storytelling. And so I always say, tell a story, not a tale. When you tell a tale, people lose interest. You want to tell a story. So weave through a story and say, here's what I tried, here's how it worked or didn't work, here's what I learned from it, and here's how you apply, and here's how you benefit from it. And if you can do that, you have the quality. Now, the key is, how do you get accepted? The way to get accepted is, you want to be able to show people that you have the ability to communicate. And you don't have to be perfect, and you don't have to be doing things like everybody else does. What makes this world beautiful is, every one of us has a different style. And if you are able to convey that you can communicate, you can, be able to have that impact, Whether your talk was in a user group or an office doesn't matter. But user groups are a really great way to start. So if you find your local user group, whether whatever city you are in, and then expand to your region, state, or province, and then expand further into the country, that's a really good way to. I started speaking in user groups. That's how I really started speaking in conferences. And if you have recordings of those, put those recordings out, blog about it and tweet about it, and then have people, look at it. But those are the key is you really have a story to tell, and then you build up on top of that.
Yeah, very good, very good. Dan actually says problem, choices, solution, result here, right?
Yeah.
And I, this what I would say, Chris, to you is that I agree with Venkat. You're already qualified because you say you have a lot of experience, right? You haven't never given a talk, but you have a lot of experience. And the thing is, a lot of times we have all those things in our head, right? I mean, we had all this experience, everything that we did, and sometimes it's hard for us to get out of our heads and organize in a way that gives a talk, right? And so I'll get what Dan said here, because this is the key. The key, of course, telling a story like Venkat said, but the key is what problem do you solve, right? What problem do people have that your experience, that your talk, that your presentation can solve for them? Because people come to watch you, Chris, not because you're Chris, not because you're Venkat. Well, maybe Venkat, people come to watch because he's Venkat, but normally people don't come to watch us. They come because they have a problem, and we are, like Venkat said, the catalyst, right? But we are the help that they need to solve the kind of problem. So what problem do you solve? And if you have a problem in mind, if you want to be accepted, make clear on your submission what problem you solve. Because people from the committee, like Venkat and me, that we're going to be choosing the talks, we're going to be looking at what kind of problems we want to solve at this conference, and we want to know what problem you're willing to come and help. So Rodrigo has a question here, Venkat, that I think it's only for you, right? He says, Venkat, it's your first conference. You need all the best minds. Why would you get someone without experience instead of people like Bruno, Josh Long, Mark Heckler? And I mean, we all know, Venkat, that you can get anyone in our industry that you want into your event. So why would you, for any reason, choose someone that doesn't have an experience yet?
So I want to be really, truly honest about it. Bruno, with all respect, I love you, and I like listening to you, and I'm thankful that you are, enjoying listening to me. But you and I are the old guys now. I want the next generation. I want the young people who are unknown out there. I want the next generation of Bruno and Venkat and
Yes.
Josh Longs to be out there. And how do you get that if we don't really cultivate those? And I'm not saying that I'm going to have only inexperienced people or people with no experience talking. That's not my objective. But my objective is to not cherry pick only people that are well known and run yet another conference of the well-known people. I want this to be a good mixture. I want this to be a good balance. I mean, if you look at the conference website, let's be honest about it, I have posted 20 different speakers already, and obviously those are well-known speakers. And it gives confidence for the attendees to know that there are some really good speakers that they can come and listen to and learn from. And some of them are really, most of them are really exceptional speakers in there. But that doesn't mean we are going to only make a conference with exceptional speakers, because how do you know unless you come to a talk how good this particular speaker is? I mean, can you imagine, rewind the clock 20 years ago, and I remember I was that person in the conference. I'm going to be honest about it. When I showed up to speak at the conference, I was not known at all. It's not only I was not known, nobody could even say my name properly, right? What is this weird name? And then you had James Duncan Davidson, that guy who created Tomcat, that guy created Ant. And I'll tell you this, I will never forget this, right? I was in the panel discussion. I was not in the panel. I was sitting in the audience, right?
Right.
I don't get to sit in the panel. And then James Duncan Davidson sits there, and then James is, about this height, right? He's a pretty average person in every regard, but unbelievably talented. and he created this best tools in Java. He would sit there and there would like 500 people in front, and he would ask the question, who here uses Ant? And the entire room raises the hand, right? And then he's like, who here created, who here uses Tomcat? Everybody raises the hand. And he's like, I created it, right? And that is the type of people who are speaking there. How could I sit there, on that, conference and give a talk? And I did. And if I had not been given that opportunity to speak among people like James, Nick, and Davids and other people, I wouldn't be here. So how could it be possible for me to say, oh, I'm going to only have all the experienced people, and I will not give the opportunity for the next generation of developers to grow up? That's very unfair in my opinion.
Yeah, that's right. And really, I mean, giving talks is like software development, right? You can only learn if you go and do it, and you can only learn if you have the opportunity to be with someone that does it well too, right? So it has to be all this mixture of people in a conference, so we can get And one thing that I love, and I would suggest anyone that wants to do that as a great way to get into becoming a speaker, is find someone that's already an experienced speaker and submit a talk with them, right? I love to do that. Anyone there's a lot of people that reach out to me, and I'll be a co-speaker of people that are not very well known, because I like this, right? When you're there, you can help. It's like pair programming for speakers, right? You speak with someone that knows more of the technology. I do this a lot, right? I speak with people that know more of the technology than I do, and sometimes I'm a better speaker than they are. So we kind of merge strengths together. So that's another good way. And
if you're going to pair up, I would say pair up with anybody, but don't pair with Josh Long. It always crashes the computer. I'm just kidding, of course. I gave a joint talk with him, and we spent more time fixing the computer because his computer crashed. It was fun to recover from.
Okay, so let's go to another one here. So Gopal says, I'm from Hyderabad, India, and I opted for a conference to pay my travel and accommodations. Is this going to affect my chance of submission to get selected? So that's a good question I get all the time, Venkat. People want to get started, and sometimes, maybe more famous speakers, they get the chance of someone sponsoring, or they work for a company that will pay the travel and everything. And I mean, is there a lot of conferences that pay for travel or speakers, even non-experienced ones? And in particular, on Dev.Next, do you expect to be able to pay some speakers? And his question in particular, does it affect that his submission to be accepted?
Right. So I'll definitely speak about Dev.Next here, and rather than talking in general, and then I'll talk a little bit about in general after that. Right. As far as Dev.Next is concerned, the answer is no. It will not affect your chance of being accepted. The program committee. So one of the ways that I've structured Dev.Next, in all honesty, is I have kept the program committee very strong, and the program committee is going to evaluate the talks that are submitted purely on the technical merit and the capability of the speaker to deliver. The program committee does not have the visibility of whether the speaker wants to be paid for travel or other things or not. Program committee doesn't know this, and you are on the program committee. I am not instructing the program committee to say, please select these talks versus these other talks. No. The conference will have an autonomy of the program committee, and they are responsible for selecting the talks for all the tracks. And then, based on the recommendations from the program committee, if they rate a talk very high, that gets accepted. Now, thankfully, though, the conference has funding to cover travel. That's not a problem at all. When I got into this, I spent 6 months in the planning phase asking these questions. What are the expenses, and how much are we going to spend for the speakers? And to me, there is only one thing that I care the most about. It is the quality and the experience of the people at the conference. That's the speakers and the attendees. So if there's a speaker who is going to give a topic that's exciting, and they are capable of delivering the topic, we want to bring them over. We are not interested in cutting the cost. If I am going to be cutting the cost, I'll tell you the best way to save money is not to run the event. because the money in my bank is going to be safe if I don't run this event. So
Right.
if that was the objective, I wouldn't be doing this. So as far as Dev.Next is concerned, it doesn't matter. You are not going to get pegged because you are saying, I want to do it all for free. Absolutely not. So if two people are equal and the committee gives an equal recommendation for both of them, they both will be selected. One will not be selected and the other not, based on whether they want for travel or not. Thankfully, everybody involved on my side making this decision are aligned with that as well. They are motivated by quality, they're motivated by doing the right things, so that wouldn't happen. Now, speaking in general, I'd be more than happy to answer more questions further on, but speaking in general, the answer to Gopal's question in general terms is it really depends. It depends on the conferences. Now, there are really good conferences, but there are also conferences run for various different reasons. There are also conferences run for as a more of a community event with an extremely razor thin budget. Not everybody has the capability to pour in money like I'm doing into this. Thankfully, I have this ability to pour money into it, but I also respect people who don't have that ability, and they may be running on a very razor thin budget. And honestly, I go speak in events which are, I mean, as an example, I just got a call from somebody 2 days ago and said, "Hey, we're running a charity event, and what can we do to get you to speak?" And my answer was, "You don't have to do anything to get me speak. You already sold me on it. You said it's a charity event. I'm going to pay for myself. I'm going to come and speak because your cost is important for me to support." And so that's a decision both the conference and the speaker has to make. If you're working for a company which is paying for your travel, that makes it. But I would challenge that actually. If a conference is picking speakers because the company is paying for it, is that going to turn into a marketing event in that case? I would be very careful as a conference. I don't want to go speak in a conference just because they will only hire people whose company pays for it, because that becomes a marketing crash after that. So there's got to be a fairly good balance. Balance is the key. You don't want a conference to say, this is how we'll do everything, but as long as their objectives are clear and open, I think that's a really good thing.
Right. Okay, so let's dive in how to make a talk, right? So Roberto says, how do I mix the text focus, for example, when present a new solution for a problem, with some storytelling so it does not get boring? So how do you mix with a lot of? I think that's an interesting thing, right, Venkat? Because we talk a lot about, it's about storytelling. When you do a presentation, you tell a story. It's all about telling a story. And a lot of people think that because we're telling a story, it can't be technical, right? But I think those two things mix together very well, right? Don't you think?
Well, it's technical topics are like vegetables being fed to children. They don't like eating it, right? So you got to make it tasty for them to be able to eat it. And these things go hand in hand. And storytelling is a part of what we do, because if we blandly present a concept, people tune out. See, the most precious thing in this world today is having people's attention. How do you have people's attention? I was in a company a few weeks ago, and it was 9 hours of talking. And the person who organized it came to me and said, "I was very worried inviting you because I don't think anybody in the room is capable of sitting for 9 hours and listening. But you held them for 9 hours. I can't believe how you did this." And the key here is to really have these modulations, right? You tell a story, you tell a joke, but not go too deep into one where the story takes dominance and people don't understand what you're saying or lose interest in it. So it's got to be a combination of things to hold people's attention. And clearly in this case, again, going back to what I said earlier, tell a story, not a tale. So if you're able to quickly say, "Hey, I was working in my office, I was trying this, and my colleagues were struggling with this when an architect came and suggested this, and here's how it happened." Well, that's a story right in there. You're giving a context, an environment to relate this. You can talk about what kind of problem you saw. So rather than saying, you need to use parameter minus D, X, Y, Z, if you can lead us to why that was needed, what was the problem you were having. So the story is actually not just the solution, but what the problem was. What are the consequences? How did your client lose money because of this problem? Or how did they lose productivity because of the problem? That's a story, right? And then when you tell these stories, you're saying, and I can't tell you how many times when I'm narrating these stories about, oh, they were having this problem, I would see people kind of look at each other, make an eye contact, and then they will nod and smile because they were having that problem 3 weeks ago at work. And then now they're hooked because you talked about the problem they were having in a scenario they can understand. And now they're on the edge of the seat because they want to know the solution you're going to provide for them. And then the pros and cons of it. And then you can tie this back into a story. Hey, we used this, and here's how the client benefited from it. Or here's how we became more productive. Here's how much time we saved. And then that's really what the part of the story is. The story is not irrelevant pieces of data. It's a spice that is added to the vegetable so that it becomes tasty and you can have it.
Yes, and a lot of times this story, it's just kind of a tiny little bit. People think that because they have to tell a story, they're going to be like 15-minute story, right? And the story can be a tiny little connection that people make. And I see this all the time when you're giving a talk and you tell a story. That's the moment that you see people saying like this with their head, right? Or they look at you in your face. So that's the moment that you spark their attention, right? So that's really, really good. All right, so Chris had to leave, but he said he's going to submit a proposal, right? So cool. That's a win right there. All right, so what else here? Let me see if I missed any questions.
So if I can ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
We have some experienced speakers on the list. I want to hear from them if they can type a few words of encouragement. Every speaker started new one day. And if they can give us a little bit of their own story, right, of their own things about, hey, here's how I started and here's how you should start. I want to learn from what they have to say. So if you're listening and you're an experienced speaker, help us out a little bit, a few words of encouragement for the rest of us in here. I would say that would be great.
Let me do one up there right there, Dan Venkat. I'm gonna do, if you're willing to. Right? If you're a speaker here, you want to encourage other speakers to participate, there's a button that can raise your hand, and then you can join us here, and you can tell your story live here with us, and then you're gonna be speaking with Bruno and Venkat, and you're gonna register for that, and then you can use this video to submit to say, I already spoke with those guys. How about that? So that's a challenge. If you want to tell encourage a story about how to get started, just come here and raise your hand. There's a button, raise your hand. Let's see if someone gets that. So that's a good point. So Venkat, let me tell you this. As you know, I was in your city, and I went to see the venue of the event. Unfortunately, you weren't there, but it was very, very nice of your wife to show me the place. So let me tell you this, guys. The place is gorgeous. It's an amazing place. Not only the hotel where the event's going to happen, but everything around it. It's an amazing place. You should all come to Colorado for this event because it's going to be great. It's going to be totally awesome, right?
It's funny you say this because, this has happened like more than once, and as late as this morning, she sits with the plan and says, oh, Bruno said don't use that room. Bruno said use this room. And then she is like, Bruno said this, Bruno said that. So I'm really glad you came out and went and saw the venue with her. That's been definitely helpful because getting that another perspective is extremely important. And, a few things I had said about what we should do. She's like, but Bruno said, to do it this way. I'm like, well, if Bruno said we should definitely listen. So thanks for doing that.
Thank God. Hopefully I didn't say something very bad.
No, this is good.
Okay, so Silvio asked, just to follow up on the story thing, Silvio asked, what's the difference between a tale and a story?
Yeah, so a tale is where you have this long-winded detail where you're presenting, and then suddenly you start talking about how things were at work. Your boss is doing that. Your supervisor did this, and your colleague did this, And then after a few minutes, you realize, oh my gosh, the speaker kind of left the idea behind and now has gone deeper into the story. And then in your mind, as an audience, you're asking the question, is this ever going to end? Are we going to listen to the technical part? That's when the story has become a tale. So the story has to be extremely short and draw the audience and connect them and provide relevance. But here is the technical theme, and here is the story, and here is the tale. So you want to be fairly close to the technical thing. So you're talking about a few things, but you're one step away from the technical thing to come back into it. But the minute you go this way, and then this way, and then now you're talking about what happened at lunch on that day, well, you've gone too far into it. So tale is where you've disconnected from the realities of the technical discussion. And I get frustrated when I sit in talks. I love stories because it is relevant to the problem we are having or the solution. But when they start telling the tale, I'm like, oh my gosh, this speaker is just ranting about stuff that's not relevant to me. Bring it back. I'll give you another example. You start a talk and you start talking about how terrible the flight was and how you had to lose your bag and how much effort you put in to get the bag back to you. That's a tale. That's got nothing to do with your talk unless your talk was about baggage handling, right? And so to me, the audience are not there to hear about your travel problems. The audience are not there to hear about how terrible it was for you to wake up that morning. Those are tales. And with all respect, I don't care about your problems. I care about how you can solve my problems, right? As an audience. So that's a tale when you go in and say, oh, you know what, my flight was canceled by 7 hours. I had to wait in the airport for 4 hours. I came in at 3 in the morning. I haven't slept really well. I'm sorry, with all respect, I don't care. You have problems. Everybody else has problems. I've had the same problems too. I just don't care to talk about it. So you'll never hear me, go to a talk and talk about my personal problems. I've had so many personal problems, throughout, but that's not your problem. You are there to benefit from the technical content, and I want to deliver that to you. That's kind of the separation of tale from the story.
Right. And a lot of times, as you said, right, you can talk about baggage if you're talking about baggage handling talk, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of times that you can get your personal stories, but they have to be relevant, right? I think that's a very, and Silvia says that's a very interesting distinction. So there's some other questions here, but I want to tell Raju's story, right? He says, much like Venkat, I started with brown bags and user groups. I believe that user groups are very valuable venues to practice your speaking skills. Since it is so community-driven, focus are extremely supportive and encouraging. My advice to new speakers is the audience wants you to succeed. If I am to sit in a room with you presenting for over 60 minutes, I want to make it worth my time. So you can count on me to be on your side. I think new speakers can be nervous because they feel they might trip over themselves. And most folks in the room want mine. So
that's so true
for your experience.
And I sat through Raju's talk recently. I can vouch for how wonderful he is in delivering it. But I would also say one more thing. I totally agree with what he says. But I add an angle to what he said, which is extremely important for speakers. What I've noticed over time is there's always that one or two people who are out to get you. And surprisingly, when that happens, there are other people in the room who step in to rescue as well, because that one person who is going on a tangent and attacking the speaker is spoiling the whole experience for everybody else in the room as well. So as a result, that person, even though they may be dragging the speaker, others step in and say, hey, why don't you just, take this offline? Let's keep the focus on it. But I would also tell you as a speaker, what I would say, I do this quite often, is if I find somebody who is really, disruptive, and thankfully this doesn't happen too often, but it will. And if it does happen, I would say immediately stop the conversation and say, I respect your input. Why don't you and I take this conversation offline? Let's talk about it so we can keep the focus of the presentation. If the person continues to be disruptive, then there are other people in the room who are going to sense this and say, hey, dude, he just told you or she just told you to take it offline. Why don't you just, take it offline? And if that person still continues, call upon people and say, I'm really sorry, I'm not able to focus, gain control back into moving forward. Thankfully, that doesn't have to happen too often, but if it does, we need to gain that back. And on that note, I'll mention one book, and this book was written by good friends of mine. It is called Presentation Pattern. I would encourage developers to read that book because a lot of these things are said in that book. This was written by good friends Neil Ford, Matthew McCullough, and Nate Judah. And they pretty much took the years of speaking experience collectively and wrote this book. It's called Presentation Pattern by Neil Ford and the other two gentlemen I mentioned. You will enjoy reading that book because they got a lot of these advices, how to deal with a situation where, somebody is trying to distract you or derail your presentation. How do you handle it? A lot of these things are presented over there as well. But I would say one of the things is when you own the stage, like Raju said, you are there and people are there to make you succeed. Why would anybody come and sit in your talk if they want you to fail, right? That's not the case. Except those two people who are trying to pull you down because they have some personal issues with maybe, this happens sometimes, right? I've had people come and be angry at me because they submitted a talk and their talk was not accepted. Who the hell are you to be there? And I'm like, sorry, this is not me at all. I didn't really cause this, so why are you taking it on me? And then we can have a conversation and move forward at the time. That sometimes happens, but that's very true, though. There was one question or comment by Roberto right there to you, Bruno. How was, to you, Bruno, to give the first talk in English, how big was your audience and what kind of experience you already had that would help with the taking in public, that is being a teacher, etc.?
Yeah, so thanks a lot for the question, Roberto. You specifically asked for my first talk in English, right? So when I first talk in English, at least in a big event, was when I spoke at Java One. Me and a friend, we had the first Brazilian Prove It talk at Java One many years ago, and I was extremely nervous. I may have given some other talks in English before that, like internal in the company, but for that talk, I was so nervous. And Sun at that time had a speaker training, right? So you could come in a day before your talk, and they would put you in a room with a camera and record your presenting and play back to you, right? So I'm a person that I move a lot on the stage, right, when I talk. And for me, speaking right here, I know how to do it now, right? But in the past, I would have a lot of trouble. I would be like moving back and forth like this, right? And so the guy on the speaker training, he was like, "No, you can't move so much, right? You have to not move." So, and he couldn't get me to stop moving, right? So he actually went down on his knees and hold my feet to the ground, right? And recorded me speaking without moving, just to show me how much better it would be if I didn't move. So I walk into the room and I was so nervous. I was sweating, and I was kind of like, I didn't know what to do. I was very nervous. And a friend of mine, she came to me and said, "Bruno, why are you so nervous?" And I said, I told her that this guy, he wants me not move so much. And she said, "Bruno, I've seen you speak before, right? And I think you're a great speaker. Just go there and do what you know. This is not the time for you to change everything." And so at that moment, she lifted a weight out of my shoulders, right? Because that's exactly what Raju just said. People are there because they want you to succeed, right? And it's not going to be you moving or not moving, or you're speaking perfect English or not perfect English, or if your code is beautiful on the screen or not. All of those things, of course, they help. Of course, they improve your talk, right? But the thing is, will people actually learn something out of you? Will they listen to your stories? Will they come inspired to experiment with something? And so I was able, because she lifted that weight off my shoulder, I was able to go on the stage and I did a good talk, right? I don't know. It's not recorded, so I don't know how good it was, right? But people like it, and lots of people asking questions, and that's how I started my international career speaking. But and so a lot of times is this, right? I think you have to have the courage to go there and do your best, right? And that's how I started my English thing.
That is so true, and one of the other things that's not related to the questions now, but one of the things I wanted to mention is, going back to the initial question that even Chris asked earlier, how do I, speak if I don't have speaking experience? Even with experience, right? Even whether you have speaking experience or not, I have given talks on technology where the person who created the technology is in the room, in the audience. And, talking about JS Lint when Douglas Crockford is sitting in the room, when I'm talking about JS Lint, talking about Scala when Martin Odrysky is there, talking about Spock when Peter Nidweiser is in the room, talking about Grails when the creators of Grails are in the room, for example, and creating, talking about Java when the creators of Java in the room. This happens a lot, and this goes back to fundamentally what Raju mentioned earlier: is those creators of technology there want you to succeed. They're not there for you to fail because
Yeah.
you're talking about their baby, right? And when you're talking about their baby, they want you to do well. And if you struggle with a few things, it's not a bad thing to ask for their assistance. As an example, I was talking about Micronaut in Dev.Next, and there was one question from the audience, and I truly don't know the answer, right? I know Micronaut, I love it, but that doesn't mean I know everything about it. But in the back of the room is filled with people who wrote Micronaut. And so one of them asked the question. I said, you know what, great question. I don't know the answer for that, but I got a good news for you. The people who wrote it are right here. So they're going to help me out. And I just pointed my hand to them and said, could you please help me here? And they stood up from where they are, gave a fairly quick answer and said, that's how it works. But if you need more things, find us here at the conference. And they sat down. And that is perfect. You don't want to let people know that you know everything because honestly, nobody knows everything. And what they really come for is to learn from what you know, but also know that you're being honest. And if you say what you don't know, that means when you say what you know, you're gaining their trust to know that you really told them what you know. So it's perfectly okay not to know. And sometimes speakers get embarrassed when they don't know something, but it's okay. We all don't know everything. That's perfectly okay. We are here to know what you know, and it's okay for you to not know things, and that's okay. Just tell us and move on. And that's something to keep in mind.
I always remember a story about this, the creators of technology. There's a good friend of mine, Fabiani Nardon, and she is a great speaker, and she did this talk. I'm trying to remember who she did with. I think it was with Fernando. But she did this talk about, I think it was comparisons between object-oriented and mapping, right? Data mapping. And so she had a comparison of all kinds of frameworks, right? Hibernate and TopLink and all of them. And that was before there was a standard, right? So and then she would ask on the audience, say, so who here uses Hibernate? And so lots of people raise their hand, and there's this guy, oh, I wrote Hibernate, right? And then who uses TopLink? And then people raise their hand, oh, I'm the guy who wrote TopLink, right? So she's like, and it was great because that's exactly what you said, right? Every time there was a discussion between those two frameworks. I mean, the people that wrote them, they were there to help kind of solve the questions and get people. And it was a great talk. It was an amazing talk. And she was very nervous every time she asked the questions because so many people are there. But all of them want the talk to be great because all of them want the audience to come out and say, yes, we should use mapping tools, right? That's what everyone wanted, right?
Right.
Okay, so Raju say thank you for sharing. It
Here.
was a great story. Thanks, Raju. Luke asked, Raju says thank you, Venkat. I think because you said he's a great speaker. And so Luke asks, will there be a variety of talk formats available? Lightning talks, 20, 30, 6 minutes talk, roundtables, etc. Can people submit all kinds of different things, Venkat?
No, no, not at this conference. So one of the things that we have as a format, a short answer and a little bit of a long answer. Short answer: take a look at the schedule. It's of course everything is to be announced over there, but it gives you an idea about the format. We can have keynotes on 3 days. On the day of the workshop, there's going to be a keynote in the evening. The second day is going to be talks which are 75 minutes long. So 60 is a little too short, 90 is a little too long. So we settle for 75 minutes. And so talks are 75 minutes long, and then ends with a keynote on the first day. Second day is a very similar format, ends with a keynote. And the third day is going to be same format, except there's a panel in the middle of the day. There are no lightning talks. There's no birds of feather session. We eventually may grow into some of those things, but for this particular time, we wanted to really keep the focus on just the core content of the conference itself. But having said that, there's a lot of space, as you saw. We got a lot of meeting space. So if somebody wants to organize a lightning talk, if somebody wants to organize a birds of feather session, we are game for it. There's no reason not to do any of those because we got a lot of space. So you are passionate about doing something, be the leader, announce it, we'll provide you the support, and there's no reason why we cannot accommodate those things. As a conference, gathering these as a call for papers and things like that, we're not doing any of those for those other things.
Okay, so Thiago says, I have to drop the call, but what a great conversation. So many helpful insights and tips. Thanks, Venkat and Bruno, for organizing this, and thanks for participating for the great questions. I agree with you, Thiago. Thanks for the great question, everyone. So Dan asks, okay, before I go to Dan, you mentioned you're going to have keynotes, right? You know what I have right here, Venkat, behind me? You're going to have keynotes?
No. That's not going to happen.
Are we going to have keynotes at the conference, Venkat?
Well, for those who
joke, if you haven't seen the video yet, so you go find out why I'm showing Venkat Angry Birds, right? Anyway, so Dan asks, how can we guess what problems would be interesting to conference? Is that a guessing game, Venkat?
So the key is to really focus on, what problem you are solving and how to make that interesting to present. This is, I've been speaking for 20 years, and this is a challenge, right? You wake up in the morning and your feet are wet, and you ask the question, how do I know what I can talk about that's going to be interesting to the audience? And the key is what is interesting to the audience is that you are sharing your experience about a problem you have been through. And you know what? If you have faced this problem and you have found a solution for it, the chances are there are other people who are interested in that as well. And that is really the key. I have given talks on really esoteric topics that would not be interesting to most people. And I've given talks on topics that everybody wants to listen to. And I've had audience come up and say they found both of those interesting because you are taking that idea, the problem, and you're presenting in a way that they're able to relate to it. So the chances are if you have had it, somebody else is going to have it. So then the question is, how do you present it in a way the conference think that topic is as interesting as you thought it is interesting, right? That's the catch. And for that, the idea is that you want to present it in a way that you are able to really be able to convey the problem that you're focusing on, but what benefit the audience derive from it. The worst kind of proposals, I think, are proposals that say, oh, I'm going to talk about Java 8. I'm going to talk about streams. I'm going to talk about filter map reduce and parallel string. That is bland. You haven't told me why I should be in your talk. You haven't told me what problem you're solving. You're telling me you're going to talk about Java 8 streams, you're going to talk about filter map and reduce. And that doesn't excite me at all. But if you tell me that why I, as a programmer, should learn about streams and filters and maps and reduce, and how is it going to solve my problem? And if you start out saying, hey, you have been doing imperative style of programming, That's great. It's worked for you really well. But did you know that imperative style of programming has accidental complexity? Well, it turns out while functional is unfamiliar to a lot of us, it reduces all that complexity. And wouldn't you want to really learn about techniques that will reduce complexity so you can go to work and solve real problems? In that regard, come to this talk. Let's learn about filters and map and how they contribute to reducing that accidental complexity. So now you're woven into this a little theme of why I should care rather than telling me what you will be doing, in the talk. I think that is the key is, first of all, tell me why you are interested in talking about it. And if you can tell me why you are interested in talking about it, then make that interesting to the audience. And the proposal committee and the conference are not important at this point because you went from what's interesting to you to convey what's interesting to the audience. And the committee is like, who are we to really stop this now? So the committee is going to look at it and say, why is this relevant? Versus, oh my gosh, this is exciting. This is what audience want to hear. Let's just step out and just let this go through. And they accept it. And there's the key. One of the things to keep in mind is don't look at proposals and decide, oh, this talk was accepted, so I can write the proposal like that. That is something I want to warn people. If Raju submits a proposal, I'm going to accept it, right? Because I know that he is capable of delivering. His proposal is not what I'm reading at that point. I'm looking for the title. Title looks exciting. This guy can deliver it. Send it through. Then you look at proposal written by Raju and say, gosh, he got accepted. I'm going to write a proposal like that, and you get rejected. So this is something we got to be very careful about. Not all accepted proposals are good samples for acceptance. And so you have to tailor the proposal based on, how much they know, the committee knows you. And it's not nepotism, right? It's a reputation that carries through. Same thing. I could go to a conference where there are people who have never heard about me in circuits. Nobody knows about me. I cannot write the proposal the same way I send it to Bruno's event because Bruno knows me and he says, oh, Venkat can deliver. I don't have to question this. Versus a John Doe or Sarah Doe has never heard Venkat speak and like, who's Venkat again? Well, I better really put together a good proposal so they feel interested about it. And that is important from the audience point of view because there are people who come to talks where they've never heard of me and they won't come to my talk if the proposal doesn't really ring any bell to them. So that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, one thing that I like to say, Dan, is that we every time that we prepare a proposal, we prepare a talk, we think, what is the content I want to put in the talk, right? So the content is like the king thing, the most important thing. But the problem is that the content, it's you, right? It's your experience, it's what you did, it's the things that you learned, it's the things the problems that you solved, it's the customer that you talk about. The content is you. And one interesting thing is that the content doesn't change much, right? Because it's you, it's your experience. Your experience doesn't change overnight, right? So you get like Venkat, for example, he has a lot of different talks, but that's like many years of experience, So and the talks build on each other because it's Venkat's experience. So the content doesn't change much, but the problem that you solve that changes, right? So no one wants to hear about you, right? But the content is you. So how do you deal with that? But every presentation, there is there's a person that has a problem that your content is going to help that person to solve, right? So you have to think about the who and what problem that who has, right? So your content can help them. So so the who and the problem is usually your title, your description. That's what you're talking about. That's what Venkat was just talking about. And then your description, right? I mean, your content. You say yes, the content is the most important thing, right? It's not. It's like the problem and who has a problem. And the thing is, Venkat just told the story about this guy working until 3 a.m. because of Venkat's talk. And your content is not gonna give as much experience to the person if they don't go and do things, right? So your content actually doesn't do anything. What does things is if the person takes some action, right? So your content is only valid if the person takes some action, because then they go home and they spend until 3 o'clock in the morning next day doing things, and that changes their life, right? So your content is actually the bridge between the problem the person has and the action they're gonna take. right? So that's, I think this is the framework that I like to think about a talk, right? Who has what problem and what action they're going to take to solve that problem. And I'm going to write the content, my content, the thing that I did in the past that will take that person from that problem to the action. And so I think this would be like more a little bit of a framework that help you structure your submission, because the who and the problem is kind of the title and the description. The action is going to help you show the content committee that you have a plan, right? You have something that people are actually we're gonna do something later. So think about those four things, and you're gonna make out your submission a lot better.
I couldn't agree more. Just to kind of resonate what you said, that is so important to keep in mind. The two things that I would kind of emphasize in what you said. One is the objective of giving a talk is not to impress the audience. That's where a lot of people go wrong, is they want to go wow the audience and say, oh my gosh, you're a great speaker. Oh, that's not the motive. That's not the objective. And a lot of times trying to do that, we end up failing. So instead focus on helping them, and then they feel the wow because they were helped. And the second thing is, our goal is never really to give everything for the audience. So it is to give them enough, like you said, to get them excited. And so in that regard, take the problem and say, what is my narrative arc? Here is where we are starting. Here is where I want to end. And how do I take them from here to here? And what is a narrative arc? And what happens a lot of times is when a speaker says, I'm going to go in and impress the audience by showing them what I know, what they did is they went from here to here to here to here. Well, guess what? Going from here to here is a jump you were able to take because you know this stuff, but you lost them, right? It's like saying you asked one person to come to the train station, but then you wait at the airport and they're like, where are you? Oh, sorry, right? So the key is to start here and say, we are connected with the audience here, but I'm going to take them to a delta and a delta. And the first few minutes can be something that's marginally familiar to them, but they're connecting with you. And then you walk the delta, 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 and then you want to draw that narrative arc in these deltas to get here. So if what you want to take them from here to here is too big, that's not a talk you're going to succeed, because we as humans don't have that ability to go from here to here with that jump. You want to really take them through this narrative arc with the deltas. So the key is, how can you lay your talk in deltas? And you may say, oh my gosh, if I do this delta, there are going to be people in the room who are not going to benefit from it. Well, guess what? The talk is not for the people who know this stuff. The talk is for people who don't know the stuff. So when I go give a talk, somebody says, oh, this guy said nothing I don't know. You know what? That's great. You know it. You should have gone to another talk where you didn't know the topic, right? I am not going to go talk about stuff you don't know and in the process miss the 90% of the people in the room, because that's a bell curve. That's what you want to really do. You want to take care of most of the people in the room. Or there may be one or two people in the room that says, I don't have a clue where this guy was. I'm sorry, I'm new to programming and I'm talking about advanced data structures. You're not going to understand that. So it's really to say, where do you want to connect with them? And then how you take these deltas to get them there. That's very important journey to take.
Yeah, very, very good. And one thing that you said, that's, you do these big jumps, right? And it's completely counterproductive, because if you do so big jumps and you impress the audience, everyone's like, oh, he's such a great speaker. But people feel overwhelmed. They're like, oh man, I can never do this. This is too much for me. I can never learn it. And so actually, not only they don't take action, they get afraid of taking action in the future. So that's actually a disservice for everyone if you do something like that.
I was listening to a speaker 2 days ago, and I'll just share with you the story. It's always nice to hear from other speakers. That's what I enjoy about spending time with other people, is we learn from them. And the speaker said, I gave a talk on this particular topic, and when I finished it, the audience came to me and they said, we've been struggling with this for 1 year, and we couldn't do this. And we saw how step by step you were able to configure these Docker files and get this running. uh, now I have the confidence to go back to my office tomorrow and do it. And we're going to have a solution, right? To give that confidence, as experienced Docker person, I will sit there and say, gosh, you told me everything I know. But that person who's been struggling for a year and who couldn't do it, that was a big win, because that's where you were there for, not for a person who knows this stuff.
Yeah. And a lot of times, there's one thing, even when people know the stuff, right? A lot of times when you tell, that's why I think it's so important is stories, right? A lot of times when you tell the stories, even when you're talking to someone that knows the thing, right? They get something out of it. And they like, oh yes, I like it. I like when you told that story. It reminded me something, and it made me think. It made me imagine, because that's when it's like a book and a movie, right? You read a book and you create the story in your mind, right? And then if you watch a movie, you kind of like, you just lay back. You don't interact as much in the imagination because it's all done for you. And so when you do a talk that you get people engaged and you tell stories, they run those things in their minds. And so they come up with ideas and thoughts that you didn't have. You didn't have to put in their head because they apply to their own life. And so even though they knew the stuff, they knew the technology, they start thinking about differently because they heard you tell a story. And so I think this is a good way for you to reach out, even people that are already there, they already know this stuff, because you get them to think about something different. So Venkat, we're on the top of the hour here, and I know you have some time to go, but Roberto is here saying next Monday I'm going to have my first presentation at conference to an audience of 100+ people. And that's going to be in English, which is not my main language I speak. So it's not mine either, and it's not Venkat's either, right? No. So we're all together here, Roberto. And so your advice came in a good time to help me get better prepared. Okay, thank you guys. Thanks a lot, Roberto.
Awesome.
Haju said that was brilliant. Thank you so much for that. Thanks a lot, Haju. That's great. Okay, so Venkat, just so we finish this here, what do you want to tell people that here with us or they watch this later on why they should submit a talk to Dev.Next?
Well, submit a talk because
Dev.Next.
Dev.Next. Submit a talk.
Dev.Next.
Submit a talk, or for any conference for that matter. Right. Submit a talk because we want to learn from you. Come tell us your story, inspire us, take us through your journey, and for every story you tell, there is another person whose efforts you're going to result in an action, like you said. So come tell us your story, inspire the rest of us. And, honestly, I've been inspired by so many people. I'm sitting in a talk, I get ideas for a project I want to work on, a way I can solve a piece of code, a book I want to write. You never know where the inspiration comes. And so be that journey. And, and by giving a talk, you are getting started on that journey. So if you have any doubt, can I speak? Well, put that doubt away, submit the talk and keep going, because everyone who is a speaker today started exactly like that. We all had a first talk we ever gave. And that was the most nerve-wracking thing we ever did. So you're not alone. Millions of people have done that before you. And for Dev.Next, I would say, we really, really want to have a diverse set of topics, diverse set of people. We got some amazing set of speakers already lined up. Not just speakers. I'll be honest about it. I'm thrilled about the volunteers that have signed up to be at the conference. I'm absolutely fortunate because people have emailed me and said, hey, I see you are running this conference. I am going to be there, boots on the ground. I am going to be doing the front desk duties for you. I'm going to tear up the conference when it's done. I'm going to set up the cables for you. I mean, these are people that I've known for years in the community who have yep, I'm there. I don't care whether you invite me or not. I'm going to come and help you there. So you get to not only learn from speakers, fellow speakers, and audience, you get to learn from the volunteers out there. These are people who are the leaders in the community. These are people who are running the user groups. These are the people running various initiatives. And what a better way to learn by being present at those. So I would say submit your talks. And if you already submitted your talks, go back and revise it. Take a look at the proposal and say, how can I rewrite it so that it becomes interesting to the audience. Don't write the proposals for the proposal committee. Don't write it for the conference. Write it for the audience. And if you can convince an audience that this is exciting, you would have convinced the proposals committee to accept it as well. And that's what I would say.
And so, Venkat, let me tell you this. I'll be there no matter what. And I'm going to help you with anything, right? I'm going to be in the reception if you need. I'm going to pass the cable. But I'm going to find a little space, right? No matter where it is, I'm going to find a little space because I'm going to be there for you, Venkat. I'm going to be there for everyone else. So I'm going to find a little space, even if it's 2 chairs in the corner. And I'll be, during the event, I'll be speaker coaching you, right? So everyone that's here, if you are a speaker at the event or not, right, you can come to Dev.Next and you look for me there, and I'll find a little space to coach you as a speaker if you don't come to this one to be a better speaker in another conference. So thanks a lot, Venkat, for doing this. Thanks for doing the event. Thanks for coming here with us. Thanks, everyone, for joining us here. It was amazing questions. And go now, create your speaker profile, submit your talks. That's going to be a great event next year.
Hey, I want to thank everyone who was here, and thank you, Bruno, not only for taking the time to do this, but also coming out and looking at the venue as well, and then for your support for the conference. I cannot say thanks enough. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. We're in this together, man. Okay, so Haju said this was awesome. Thank you so much for this. Looking forward to Dev.Next. Hope to see you. That was awesome. There's so many. That was a great discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. I'm not able to interact much because I'm on my job right now, but I'm enjoying a lot hearing from you guys. Great meeting Bruno and Venkat. A lot of inspiration for us. So thanks a lot, Dorival.
I'll say Dorival was an inspiration for a lot of us, and I hope to see him some other day. It is wonderful to have him.
Okay, cool. All right. Alan, say thanks a lot, guys. Okay, so thanks a lot, Venkat. I'll see you. Thanks, man.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.